I never imagined a quiet winter break in my parents' house could turn into something out of a nightmare. I had just finished my first semester of college and came home for a few days to catch up on sleep, unpack my things, and maybe get some studying done for the upcoming exams. The house was in the countryside, nestled at the end of a long snow-covered lane, far enough from the neighbors that silence wrapped around it like a heavy blanket. At first, I loved it. Peaceful. Isolated. Perfect. By the second night, though, something felt off. I was curled up in the living room with a blanket and a cup of cocoa when I heard it, a soft thump, coming from the front of the house. My first thought was the wind, but the sound didn't match anything I'd ever heard outside. The next thump followed, then another, like someone was deliberately testing the doors. I froze, listening. The house was supposed to be empty except for me. I called my roommate for a quick distraction, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But as I hung up, I noticed something strange through the window, footprints in the freshly fallen snow, leading up to the porch. They didn't look like animal prints. They were human, and they stopped right at the door. My stomach dropped. I checked every lock, drew the blinds, and went upstairs to my old bedroom, telling myself it was probably just a neighbor walking their dog. But then I heard it, creaking from the hallway outside. Soft, careful steps, but deliberate. Someone was inside. My heart raced as I grabbed my phone and hid under my bed, praying the signal worked. I texted my roommate with the shortest message I could type. "Someone is in the house. Call 911. The waiting was unbearable. I could hear them moving downstairs, doors opening, things shifting, the occasional whisper I couldn't understand. Every minute felt like an hour. My mind ran through every horror movie I'd ever seen, every warning I'd ever ignored. Don't confront them. Don't make a sound. Stay alive. I held my breath when the footsteps came upstairs, pausing right outside my door. I could see shadows through the crack. Then a voice, a woman's, called softly. "Hello? Anyone here?" I stayed perfectly still, praying she wouldn't try the door. The steps moved on, heading toward my parents' room. The silence was deafening. Somewhere downstairs, a man's voice responded to hers. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that this wasn't random. They were looking for something. Someone. The sirens were a distant, hopeful sound in the winter night, but to me, they were salvation. I could only sit there, trembling, until the chaos downstairs reached its peak, doors slamming, shouting, crashes that rattled the walls. My heart wouldn't stop pounding. When the police finally arrived, I didn't know whether to cry or collapse in relief. Even with officers outside, checking the snow-covered yard and questioning neighbors, I knew one thing: this wasn't over. Whoever had been in my house had planned it. They knew I would be alone. They had watched. They had waited. And I couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't truly left. The days after that night were unbearable. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on schoolwork, couldn't even sit in the living room without glancing at every window. My parents returned, worried and exhausted, but even their presence couldn't erase the unease crawling under my skin. I kept replaying the sound of footsteps on the stairs, the creak of my bedroom door, the cold shadow passing under it. Whoever had been in our house had known exactly where to look, what to touch, and where to find me hiding. I tried to convince myself it was over. The police had searched the surrounding woods, checked the neighbors' houses, and collected every scrap of evidence. They found some tools in a van abandoned a few streets over and a clipboard with addresses scrawled across it. Homes they had already hit earlier that week. Our house was on that list, but the intruders had vanished, leaving nothing behind except for the terrifying memory. They hadn't been random. Someone had planned this meticulously, watched me, tracked my routine, studied when I'd be alone. I thought I could sleep, but the silence of the house became unbearable. Every small sound, a gust of wind rattling the old windows, the branches scraping the siding, the snow crunching under a passing car, felt like a warning. I started setting up cameras, motion sensors, anything to make me feel safe. Yet even as I watched the monitors, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me. Sometimes I swore I saw shadows moving just beyond the range of the cameras, a hint of something waiting, testing, planning. One evening, just as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, the doorbell rang. I froze. My parents were downstairs. I had locked myself in my room. I didn't move. The camera showed a delivery driver standing on the porch, package in hand, but instead of leaving, he crouched and raised his phone toward the house, as if taking a picture. I called the police immediately. They traced the rental van, discovered a fake label and a stolen card, and assured me they were watching, but the dread didn't leave. It wasn't just the one night that haunted me. Weeks later, while scrolling through the town's social media group, I noticed a post about a new neighborhood watch program. The account was brand new, no history, comments already piling up with people signing their names and addresses. My stomach sank. I reported it, but the post disappeared only 6 days later. The information, however, was already out there. And even now, months later, when snow falls and white vans glide silently along the back roads, I freeze. My heart skips a beat, my hands tighten on my phone, and I wonder if they are still out there, watching. I've learned to trust my instincts, to question friendly strangers, to never open doors without verifying who's outside. Every package, every knock, every unfamiliar car becomes a test. And though I'm back at college now, surrounded by friends and noise, I still see it in my dreams. The shadows on the stairs, the soft creaking of a door being tested, the whispered conversation of people who know more about me than I want them to. Sometimes I catch myself thinking, maybe they're gone. But I know better. People like that don't disappear. They move on to the next house, the next town, the next unsuspecting target. And maybe, just maybe, they're already planning their next move, watching, waiting, silent in the snow. And if I'm not careful, I'll never even see them coming. I always thought living in a rural town meant safety. Nothing but long dirt roads, empty fields, and neighbors so far apart that everyone minded their own business. When my parents left for a week-long business trip, I didn't feel scared at all. I was 18, fresh out of high school, and confident I could handle a quiet house on my own. The first 2 nights were peaceful. Movies, late-night snacks, the kind of freedom you only notice when no one is watching you. That changed on the 3rd night. I was brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. Unknown number. The message was simple: lights are still on. I laughed it off, assuming it was spam or a wrong number, but when I stepped into the hallway, my laughter died. The kitchen light was on. I was sure I'd turned it off. I told myself it was nothing. Old house. Bad memory. Still, I locked every door before going to bed. The next morning, I noticed tire tracks near the end of our driveway. We rarely had visitors, and delivery trucks never came that far out. The tracks looked fresh. I took a picture, mostly to reassure myself that I wasn't imagining things. That night I heard a car. It was slow, deliberate, crunching gravel as it pulled onto the road in front of our house. I peeked through the blinds and saw a dark vehicle parked with its lights off. It didn't move. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. My phone buzzed again. Home Alone suits you. My heart slammed against my ribs. I shut off all the lights and crouched behind the couch, staring at the front door. The car eventually drove away, but sleep didn't come. Every sound, the wind, the house settling, felt louder, closer. Over the next few days, the signs grew worse. Footprints near the shed. The back gate left open. A faint tapping noise outside my bedroom window late at night, like someone brushing their fingers against the glass. Each time I checked, nothing was there. I finally reviewed the security camera footage my dad had installed months earlier and mostly forgotten about. That was when I realized this hadn't started when my parents left. The recordings showed the same vehicle driving past our house for weeks. Sometimes it slowed. Sometimes it stopped just out of view. One clip showed someone standing at the edge of our property during the afternoon, staring at the house. Not moving. Just watching. Then I found the oldest clip. It showed a man at our front door, talking to my mother while I was out. No audio, just body language. She looked distracted. He pointed toward the road, gesturing like he was explaining something official. After a few minutes, she nodded and closed the door. I called my parents immediately. My mom remembered the visit, a man claiming to be part of a local utility company, asking about outages and schedules. She hadn't thought much of it at the time. That was when I realized something terrifying. Whoever this was didn't just know I was alone. They knew when I would be. The first thing the police told me was not to stay in the house alone anymore. The second thing they told me was that without direct proof of a crime, there was very little they could do. They drove around the area, took notes, and promised extra patrols. Then they left, their car lights disappearing down the same dark road I now dreaded. That night I stayed. I don't know why. Maybe pride. Maybe denial. I locked myself in my parents' bedroom, phone clutched in my hand, watching the camera feed instead of sleeping. Just after midnight the screen flickered. The car returned. It parked farther away this time, just beyond the trees. A figure stepped out and stood still, almost blending into the darkness. Minutes passed. Then the camera on the side of the house cut out. My phone buzzed. "You should have left." I didn't think. I ran. I grabbed my keys, slipped out the back door, and sprinted across the field toward my nearest neighbor's house, my lungs burning with every step. I didn't look back. I stayed with them until my parents rushed home the next morning. They upgraded everything. More cameras. Motion lights. Reinforced locks. The house felt like a bunker when we returned. For a while, things were quiet. No strange cars. No messages. No footsteps in the dirt. I thought it was over. Then, 2 weeks later, a package appeared on our porch. No address. No return label. Inside was a printed photo of our house, taken from the road. On the back, written in thick black ink, were 3 words. "I'm still watching." The police traced nothing. No fingerprints. No leads. Just another unanswered question. I moved out shortly after, staying with friends, then leaving town entirely. My parents eventually sold the house. The new owners reported nothing unusual, and the cameras never caught that car again. But sometimes, late at night, I'll get a notification on my phone. Unknown device attempted to access your camera. Different city. Different house. Same feeling. I don't know who it was. I don't know what they wanted. And that's the worst part. Because whatever they were waiting for, they never needed the house. I never expected a weekend at my parents' remote countryside house to turn into a nightmare. I had stayed behind while they drove 2 hours away to a family gathering. My college project, a massive research paper worth almost half my grade, was due Monday, and I was determined to finish it without distractions. The house sat on a long, snow-covered lane, surrounded by pines that rattled in the wind. Outside, the world was silent, cold, and empty. Inside, I felt completely alone. I spent the day holed up in my room, laptop glowing on the desk, notebooks and papers scattered around me. The warm air from the heater mixed with the scent of coffee, and for a while, I felt safe. That was until I decided to take a break and clear my mind. I went up to the attic, something I rarely did, to grab a few reference books. As I shuffled through old boxes, a pile of strange notebooks and folders fell out from behind some crates. They weren't mine. The leather covers were worn but new, and the pages inside were filled with detailed notes about our house, floor plans, sketches of my bedroom, even schedules. One notebook had dates that were just last week, with careful observations of when my parents left in the morning, when I usually worked, when I took breaks. Another folder contained printouts of my class timetable and a list of assignments, with notes written in neat, deliberate handwriting. My stomach turned cold. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some old journal from the previous owner. Maybe someone had left it behind years ago. But as I flipped through the pages, I noticed something horrifying. There were notes about me. Observations of me working on my laptop, eating in the kitchen, walking to the bathroom. The author had circled the window in my bedroom where I always kept the light on at night. Every habit I thought was private had been recorded. I backed away slowly, my mind racing. A faint sound from below made my heart jump, a floorboard creaking as if someone had stepped carefully across the first floor. I froze, gripping the notebooks. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe an animal had sneaked in. But then I heard it again, heavier this time, deliberate. Someone was in the house. My bedroom door was locked, but that didn't stop the fear from clawing at me. I grabbed my phone, but the battery was low, the signal weak. My hands shook as I considered my options. Hide? Escape? Confront? I retreated to the attic, crouching behind the crates, whispering to myself to stay calm. Every floorboard creak, every gust of wind, felt like it was coming from inside the house. Whoever had written these notes had been studying me, learning my schedule, and now they were here. The hours stretched into an unbearable crawl. I stayed in the attic, barely breathing, every sense straining for any sound. Shadows moved across the hall below, subtle but distinct. I caught glimpses of a dark hoodie through the frosted window of the staircase landing. Whoever it was, they were moving slowly, deliberately, checking rooms. My heart hammered. I remembered the notebooks, their detailed observations, the pages about my habits. This wasn't random. This wasn't a coincidence. I tried to think of a way out. The attic had a small window, too high and narrow for me to climb through. The front door was several rooms away, and I couldn't risk running. My phone barely had enough signal to send a text. I typed a desperate message to my roommate. Someone's in the house. Please call 911. Winter, rural, alone. I hit send and prayed the message went through. Minutes, or hours, I couldn't tell. Later, the creaking stopped. Silence filled the house, so heavy it pressed against my ears. Then I heard it, a slow, careful shuffle up the stairs, deliberate footsteps, each one calculated, pausing outside the attic door. My stomach turned to ice. Whoever it was, they were testing, listening. I held my breath, pressing myself against the wooden crates, clutching the notebooks like a shield. A voice whispered, soft, calm, almost friendly. You work late. You like to hide up here. My blood ran cold. He, or she, knew. They had been inside while I was working, studying me, memorizing every corner of this house. My instincts screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The attic door creaked slightly as the handle turned, just a fraction, testing the lock. I had an idea, a desperate, terrifying plan. The attic had a trapdoor leading to the roof, barely wide enough for me to squeeze through. I waited until the shadow moved away for a second, then pushed the trapdoor open. The cold winter wind hit my face like a slap, and I scrambled out, clutching the notebooks, sliding onto the snow-covered roof. I landed hard, snow biting through my clothes, heart hammering. I ran toward the lane, screaming, praying someone would hear me. Lights flicked on in the neighboring houses, neighbors appearing in their doorways. My shouts carried through the crisp night air, and for a moment, I thought I was safe. But even as I reached the road, trembling and gasping, I knew the notebooks weren't just papers. They were evidence of someone who had planned this meticulously. Someone who could be back. And even months later, when I returned to my project in the warmth of my dorm, I still checked my window at night, convinced that the figure is watching again, waiting for another winter night. The notebooks remain, scattered on my desk. Each time I glance at them, I feel the same unease, the creeping certainty that this story isn't over. Whoever tracked me, studied me, and planned so carefully, they haven't stopped. And the cold, silent countryside still holds its secrets.